The most successful person I ever encountered once shared something with me that quietly reshaped the entire direction of my existence. Carl Jung observed, "Your outer appearance tends to be a direct reflection of your inner world, and if you cannot master what you see in the mirror each morning, you may never fully master your destiny." Those words didn't simply reach my ears. They moved through the layers of illusion I had carefully constructed around myself. In that moment, I began to understand that I had been living in a kind of quiet denial, convincing myself that the way I presented to the world carried no connection to the condition of my soul. Most people over 40 still hold on to this same comforting illusion, that appearance is something superficial, irrelevant, perhaps even vain. But Jung's observation points to something far more profound. He proposed that the human being functions as a bridge between the inner and the outer, and that both tend to thrive when they exist in harmony. So allow me to ask you something that might feel uncomfortable. When was the last time you genuinely looked at yourself in the mirror and felt authentic admiration for the person gazing back at you? When was the last time you saw not merely a face, but a living force, a being with full awareness of their own essence? If your honest answer is a long time ago, or perhaps never, then what follows is intended for you. Because this is not simply about altering how you look, it's about shifting how you perceive yourself. If you are still watching this, you are already part of the rare few who are willing to face what most people spend their entire lives running from. 97% of people scroll past content like this, not because it does not reach them, but because it reaches them too deeply. If this is already moving something inside you, subscribe to Jung's Psychology Hub right now and turn on notifications. What you are about to hear does not just explain the relationship between your outer image and your inner world, it will permanently change how you see yourself. Jung proposed that the psyche continuously seeks wholeness, and that much of what appears in your external life tends to reflect what is unfolding within you. So if your reflection no longer stirs something in you, it may be a signal that your inner self has been quietly overlooked. After decades of studying the human psyche and observing countless individuals from vastly different walks of life, Jung noticed what appeared to be a consistent pattern. When the outer image begins to align with the inner truth, life often starts to move with greater ease. When there is coherence between what you feel and what you project, existence can shift from feeling like a struggle into something that resembles a flowing rhythm. This is not vanity, it's alignment. It's what some describe as psychological resonance. I once encountered a woman who seemed to embody this imbalance in a striking way. On paper, she appeared to have everything: a fulfilling career, stability, a loving family. But her eyes carried a quiet, unmistakable fatigue. During a break at one of my conferences, she approached me and quietly admitted, "I've accomplished everything I set out to achieve, but every morning I wake up feeling as though something has already been lost." When she looked in the mirror, she no longer recognized the person she had once envisioned for herself. I shared with her something I now offer to many people. Your appearance is not an act of vanity. It can be an act of responsibility. Responsibility toward your essence, your sense of purpose, and the energy you extend into the world around you. There is a psychological dimension worth exploring here. Each time you look in the mirror, your mind appears to perform an unconscious comparison, matching the physical image before it with the internal image you hold of yourself. When these two tend to align, your mind may release chemicals associated with energy, focus, and a sense of capability. You may feel more alive and more connected to your own potential. But when there is dissonance, when the reflection doesn't seem to resonate with who you believe yourself to be, your mind can interpret that gap as a kind of internal threat. The body may respond with elevated stress, and from there, your energy, creativity, and emotional clarity can begin to quietly erode. This may be why on days when you feel a sense of ease about how you look, everything around you can seem to flow a little more naturally. Conversations feel lighter. People may respond to you differently. Possibilities appear with less effort. It may not be coincidence. It could be that you are operating from a place of inner order and self-approval. Jung might have described these moments as ones where your persona, the image you extend to the world, is in closer harmony with your deeper self. Now, it's worth being clear about something. Caring about your appearance is not the same as falling into narcissism. It's not about surface-level preoccupation. It's about nurturing a consistent ritual of self-respect. Consider it an act of genuine care toward the vessel that carries your consciousness. If you owned an extraordinary instrument, would you leave it unattended, untuned, slowly deteriorating? Most likely not. You would tend to it thoughtfully because you understood its value. Your body, your presence, your image. These can serve as instruments through which your inner life expresses itself in the material world. When they are neglected, something in your experience of yourself may grow quieter than it needs to be. I remember facing this truth myself. I was 52, professionally engaged, traveling, sharing my work with audiences around the world. But one evening, my wife showed me a photograph taken during one of my lectures. I looked at it and felt an unfamiliar stillness. Is that really me? The man in the image appeared exhausted, distant, somehow disconnected from the vitality I believed I still carried. That image became an unexpected mirror, and that night something shifted. I made a quiet decision. I would no longer allow my reflection to contradict the life I was working to build. From that point forward, I began treating my appearance as an extension of my integrity, not driven by ego, but by a desire for coherence. Because if you speak about discipline and purpose, your image may need to carry some of those same qualities. When you approach your morning routine as a ritual of intention rather than obligation, something can begin to shift gradually. Each time you move through your day with even a small degree of awareness, showering mindfully, dressing with some deliberate thought, tending to your body with a measure of respect, you may be sending a quiet message to your subconscious that you are worth the attention, that your life holds meaning, that you are preparing yourself to meet the day. That woman I mentioned earlier took this perspective seriously. Within several months, she appeared remarkably different, not because she had become someone new, but because she had begun to let more of who she already was come forward. Her energy shifted. Something behind her eyes came alive again. Her professional and personal circumstances began to open in ways she hadn't anticipated. When I later asked her what had changed, she said something I've never forgotten. I finally chose to look like the woman I had always felt I was on the inside. That perhaps is what Jung was pointing toward. Your appearance is not a mask. It may function more like a mirror, not concealing who you are, but gradually revealing who you have been choosing to become. When the external begins to reflect the internal, something settles. Clarity tends to emerge, and life may begin to feel less like resistance and more like momentum. If any part of this is resonating with you, I'd encourage you to subscribe to Jung Psychology Hub and turn on notifications. There is much more to explore together, and the conversations we're building here are designed for people who are ready to look honestly at themselves and grow from what they find. So the next time you stand before a mirror, consider shifting the question. Instead of searching for flaws, look for alignment. Ask yourself whether the image in front of you reflects the person you are in the process of becoming. If the answer feels uncertain, that's not a reason for guilt. It may simply be an invitation to begin with gentleness and with intention. The first principle I want to share is what I call the mirror principle. Each morning, before stepping into your day, look into your own eyes for 30 full seconds. Not to evaluate, not to judge, simply to connect. Ask yourself whether the person looking back appears ready. Does what you see feel consistent with your values, your sense of inner strength, your highest vision of who you are becoming? If the answer is no, consider taking some small action. Adjust your posture, attend to your hair, choose a different shirt. These may appear to be minor gestures, but in the language of the psyche, they can carry real weight. They may tell your unconscious that you are present and that you intend to show up as the version of yourself that matters most to you. The second principle is what I call the 10-minute investment. Each day, consider setting aside 10 additional minutes for your physical presentation. Not 5, not 15, simply 10. Those minutes have the potential to become among the most meaningful of your entire day. You might use them to move your body, tend to your skin, or select your clothing with a little more thought than usual. The intention is not perfection, it is self-respect. Consistency, when practiced over time, has a way of quietly reshaping how you perceive your own worth. Think about how many minutes disappear into content that leaves no trace, or into messages that don't truly matter. 10 minutes turned consciously toward yourself may alter the quality of the next 24 hours in ways that are difficult to predict, but often deeply felt. The third principle is what I call the personal standard. Consider defining, as clearly as you can, how you genuinely wish to look and feel, and then honoring that standard even when no one else is present, perhaps especially when no one else is present. Because as Jung suggested, the unconscious is always observing. And when you honor your private standards over time, something in your self-perception tends to deepen in a way that external praise rarely can replicate. The fourth principle is the 1% philosophy. Rather than reaching for sweeping, dramatic transformation, the kind that tends to be difficult to sustain, consider improving your appearance or your energy by just 1% each day. One day it might mean experimenting with a slightly different detail in how you carry yourself. The next, it could mean a small addition to your morning care or a subtle correction in your posture. These microscopic acts, accumulated over time, can compound in ways that surprise even those who apply them. Within a year, you may not simply look different. You may feel genuinely renewed. The fifth principle, and perhaps the one with the widest reach, is what I call the multiplier effect. How you feel about yourself tends to extend outward. Your presence influences every person you encounter. When you move through the world feeling grounded and centered, people often seem to respond to something they can't quite name. Jung proposed that the psyche is, in some sense, contagious. Your inner harmony can quietly invite others to access their own. When you cultivate self-respect through your appearance, you may find that you begin to attract not only greater opportunity, but also a different quality of connection and vitality. Those who consciously embody their worth tend to receive life differently. They don't chase recognition. They seem to draw it organically, quietly, sustainably. This brings us to something worth reflecting on carefully. Caring for your appearance after 40 is not vanity. It may be a form of leadership. Each morning you step into the world presenting yourself with intention. You may be offering others a quiet, unspoken permission to do the same. Consider the people you most admire. How do they carry themselves? How do they move through the world? My sense is that they have come to understand what Jung often implied, that outer expression tends to reflect inner mastery, and that excellence, once cultivated in one area of life, has a way of spreading into others. Perhaps you find yourself thinking, but I'm not in my 20s anymore. My body has changed. Time has passed. And that is entirely true. But maturity in Jung's framework was never meant to be an excuse for neglect. If anything, it can become a reason for refinement. At 40, 50, or 60, your appearance has the capacity to express something that youth often cannot. Wisdom, depth, and a kind of quiet, settled confidence. You are not competing with an earlier version of yourself. You are defining what meaningful maturity can look like. When I turned 65, I made a quiet commitment to myself, not to appear younger, but to feel more awake and more present than I had in years. I began moving my body with real intention, eating with greater awareness, and choosing what I wore with some thought behind each decision. The effects extended well beyond the physical. My thinking sharpened, my energy expanded. My work took on a quality of presence that I hadn't quite felt before. I was showing up to conversations with more attentiveness, writing with more depth, and experiencing daily life with a quality of gratitude that felt new. Now, I'd like to invite you to do something. Pause for a moment and, if you're able, move toward the nearest mirror. Look into your own eyes and ask yourself honestly, am I honoring the gift of this body, this life, this particular moment to do something that matters in the world? If your answer is yes, continue. If it's something less certain, then consider today, not tomorrow, not the beginning of next week, as a reasonable place to begin. I want to offer you a practical tool that draws from Jung's approach to self-observation. I call it the 5-minute mirror audit. Tonight, before you sleep, stand before a mirror and ask yourself 5 questions. Does my current appearance reflect who I genuinely wish to become? What 3 things might I improve in a realistic and immediate way? What self-care practice have I been quietly avoiding? If I saw someone who looked exactly as I do now walking into an important meeting, what might I assume about them? And finally, what am I silently communicating to the world through the image I currently project? Sit with your honest answers. Jung believed that meaningful transformation tends to begin only when we are willing to face our own truth, without the protection of comfortable stories. Then choose one specific, achievable action for tomorrow. Something small but deliberate. What matters most is that it is concrete, because lasting change rarely emerges from grand declarations. It tends to grow from small, consistent acts repeated with intention over time. Let me tell you about a case that stayed with me. A woman named Elena, 52 years old, attended a lecture in Madrid. She had worked in marketing for 2 decades, but after a period of professional restructuring, she had lost not only her position, but also her sense of herself. When we spoke, she said quietly, "I feel invisible. I walk into rooms and no one seems to notice. In interviews, I feel like I communicate no authority." The response she received was something like this: invisibility is rarely about age. It tends to be about presence. And presence often begins with how you choose to show yourself to the world. Elena began with subtle, manageable changes. She adjusted her posture. She updated her wardrobe with pieces that actually fit her current form. She introduced a simple, sustainable movement practice and gave some attention to details she had been allowing to drift. 6 months later, Elena had not only found a stronger professional position, she had begun building her own consultancy. Her external shift had opened something internal. The lesson, I think, is significant. When you begin to change how you appear, you can change how the world receives you. But more importantly, you may begin to change how you receive yourself. Your appearance functions as a kind of silent language, a personal symbol that communicates something before a single word is spoken. Consider what yours might currently be saying. Does it suggest someone in command of their direction, or someone who has momentarily lost the thread? These questions are uncomfortable, but they may also be necessary. Until you are willing to look honestly at the image you are projecting, it becomes difficult to shift it intentionally. And perhaps you find yourself thinking, shouldn't people evaluate me on the basis of character, not appearance? Ideally, perhaps. But Jung would gently remind us that we don't navigate the ideal world. We move through a symbolic one. Research suggests that people form initial impressions within the first several seconds of an encounter. In those moments, your appearance tends to communicate before your words do. This is not about what is fair. It is about what is real. And once you understand it as real, you can choose to engage with it as a tool rather than a limitation. Each morning that you invest genuine attention in presenting yourself with care, you may be delivering a quiet but consistent message to your own subconscious that you matter, that your life carries value, that your aspirations are worth showing up for. When that message is repeated daily, it gradually stops functioning as an affirmation and begins operating as a belief. And beliefs, over time, have a way of shaping the choices that shape a life. That is, in essence, the transformation Jung pointed toward. When the inner and outer worlds meet in genuine coherence, something in the self begins to reorganize. Allow me to offer one more tool that connects to this principle. I call it the ritual of the three mirrors. Each day, consider engaging with three distinct reflections. The first is literal, the physical mirror, where you examine your outer appearance with honesty and care. The second is emotional, where you pause and ask yourself how you actually feel about yourself today, and whether your external presentation reflects that inner state. The third is aspirational, where you consider whether the way you are presenting yourself today is moving you closer to the person you are working to become, or drifting in another direction. This practice can help develop a layered awareness of your self-image and of the subtle ways it may be shaping the contours of your daily experience. Now, before we close, I want to share with you something I find genuinely fascinating, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. There are numbers that appear across multiple traditions and fields of inquiry: quantum physics, psychology, ancient philosophy, that are said to carry a particular kind of resonance. Numbers like 7, 77, and 777 appear across cultural and scientific contexts as symbols of alignment and inner coherence. The number 11 is often associated with moments of awakening and self-recognition. And 528, known in some research as a frequency associated with transformation, has drawn serious interest from those studying sound and consciousness. If any of these numbers feel significant to you in relation to what you've heard today, I'd invite you to drop one in the comments below. There's no right answer, but it tends to be a genuinely interesting way to reflect on where you currently are in your own process of becoming. Let me close with a final reflection. Think for a moment about opportunities that may have passed because your outer image didn't quite match what you knew yourself capable of. Think about connections that might have deepened if you had been projecting more of your actual confidence. Think about the version of yourself that may have been quietly waiting behind a presentation that no longer reflected who you had grown into. The moment to act is not somewhere in the future. Motivation in most cases tends to follow action rather than precede it. Your appearance is not vanity. It may be among the more strategic, psychologically informed choices you make each day. It is a declaration, quiet but consistent, that you take your life and your direction seriously. Write this down if something in it resonates. My appearance is an investment in my future. Read it aloud. Sit with it, because that single shift in perspective has the potential to change a great deal. Imagine waking up each morning and feeling genuinely at ease with who is looking back at you. Imagine that energy flowing into your conversations, your work, and the relationships that matter most. That is not fantasy. It is an attainable state, one that tends to begin with a decision, followed by consistency, followed by the quiet understanding that caring for your appearance is, at its core, caring for your life. If this conversation has stirred something in you, I want to invite you to take one concrete step today. Not tomorrow, today. And if you'd like to continue exploring these ideas together, subscribe to Jung Psychology Hub and activate the notification bell. The tools and frameworks we share here are designed for people who are genuinely ready to look honestly at themselves and grow from what they find. Your future self tends to be shaped by the choices you make in moments like this one. This could be one of them.